Welcome into the Jock Market Strategy Show here on Awesemo. Myself, Eric Lindquist, Tyler is producing, and the show brought to you by, powered by, and all for you here, Jock Market. And we're going to tell you everything and take you deep into some strategy. The stock market now that's been flipped here with DFS Sports, as we've been telling you about back in the NBA season through the NFL season, a really cool, new, innovative twist on how to continue to make money. That's really what this has always been about, is to make money, bring in some cash. But in this case, it's awesome. You have the IPO ahead of time where you can put bids in, and then from there, once action starts, nothing stops. Your lineups aren't locked in by any means. You can buy, you can sell, you can get ahead of curves. And the beauty of Jock Market will always be that there's constantly something happening. And again, you can use our promo code Awesemo for a 100% match up to $50. Keep that in mind. We'll remind you about that. Eric Lindquist, what's up, brother?
What's going on, my dude? I feel like I haven't seen you forever, which is not a good feeling. I enjoy hanging out with you, and got to see you and Ben talking a little props and a little bit of everything on the previous show. Two sharp guys chatting. I kind of know where you're going to be going with some of your analysis, but we'll see if I can put a different spin on it for you.
Well, all right. So let's look at how you approach this game tonight. We also know from the IPO standpoint, it's about getting in, placing bids. There's the break-even point, and there are constant tools that you can use on site. One of them is the rankings that we have for Jock Market, and definitely follow along with that, as well as what we have specifically with the break-even points for a lot of these players. So if you kind of just match what you think is going to happen tonight, where we can start to attack some players with the IPO, knowing that there's going to be some less risk maybe for a couple of guys with a break-even rank. I don't even know if it's more about starting with Washington or New York for you.
It's probably a little bit starting more with Washington. I think they're the favorites in the game, and you got to insinuate the total is 40.5 here. I mean, it's dropped from 42.5 to 40.5 around the industry right now. That is as low as you're going to find all season long. It's like borderline what we had for preseason games here, where it was like high 30s totals. I think we'll start from the Washington side and kind of work our way around.
All right, so let's begin. And again, 30 minutes before the game tonight, and really every game, the IPO closes and shares are released, and you're never out of it if you don't get in on that. There's constant movement once the game begins, which is always the equivalent of a live bet if you're looking at it from an odds standpoint. So you're constantly paying attention to how things play out. Why don't you start with how you expect things to play out, specifically for Washington, with the game kind of in the backdrop?
So I see a lot of defense in this one for sure. I don't think that there's any shock to that. I think you just kind of start from that perspective, is reverse engineering what this game script will look like. And I think it's going to be very slow moving. I can't imagine there's going to be a ton of pass attempts on both sides. But what I do know is Daniel Jones is a very volatile quarterback. 2 years ago, his rookie season, there were a lot of massive games that the guy was able to put up. But as time has gone on, they've kind of taken the ball out of his hands. They've taken the air out of the football and just kind of been on the ground, short out routes, and then he turns the ball over an absolute ton. So I think that there's a lot of value that exists here on Jock Market, where it's PPR scoring, where we're trying to identify some of these mid-level wide receivers that might be going a little bit underrepresented in the market, finding some value in them from a PPR perspective. Because I think just like every single slate, the guys like Taylor Heineke and Daniel Jones, they're going to just be going a little bit more expensive than what they probably should be. Might be able to find some PPR value if those two quarterbacks do not find the end zone, which is kind of what I'm hoping for Jock Market purposes.
So you'd look at it more so from maybe an ancillary receiver having a good enough day to where it bumps up his value, and not at the expense of a 3-touchdown performance by either Jones or Heineke.
Exactly. And I think that there's ways. The one thing that I wish I talked more about on Jock Market shows is it's not just buying a couple shares of one player, you can literally tier it in a certain way where I can get 5 or 6 shares of a guy like Adam Humphries, who's going to be having a very low ADOT. They're probably going to be getting the ball into his hands. James Bradbury exists on the Giants side too. And that's a guy that I don't factor in a whole lot of cornerback matchups. I factor in James Bradbury just about every single time. He made Cortland Sutton his last week for sure. 3 targets, 1 catch, 14 yards. I got a feeling that James Bradbury is going to be spending a lot of time around Terry McLaurin's existence tonight. So I like going to Adam Humphries. I like going to some of these Diami Brown pieces. I think you can get them very, very cheap. And in a PPR format where they're getting kind of plastered with some of these targets, Logan Thomas is going to be a big part of what I do around the industry today. I think that the Washington side could have some interesting pieces here. But Taylor Heineke is a quarterback. If I'm going to one of the two quarterbacks, it's definitely going to be him. He's only started one game during a regular season, but we saw him start in that playoff game against the Bucs last year, 26 for 44, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, but 6 rushes for 46 yards. I think Daniel Jones also has some presence with his legs, but I just feel like Taylor Heineke, less tape on him available, a little bit better skill position players around him. I'm going to kind of be siding with him a little bit more than Daniel Jones.
Before we get to the ground game and Barkley specifically with Gibson as well, I know you love yourself some Saquon Barkley props
I'm a sicko
in this football game. So we'll see how that transfers over for Jock Market by all means. But back to your point about that wide receiver, if you mentioned Brown, where is that line for the Giants? Does Slayton kind of still fall under the radar, or is that where the value, you see you shaking your head a little bit, is that where the value becomes too much of a risk and not enough of a return to where there really isn't for the top 3 receivers for the Giants?
So, I mean, after week 1, it's very easy because, I mean, I just get excited. I'm like a little golden retriever. I pretty much went back and watched just about every single game. And I got to say, the one game that was the least enjoyable to watch was definitely this Broncos-Giants game. There was nothing going on, 27-13. And I got to say, even the Broncos, like, they were efficient and they didn't really need to do a whole heck of a lot there. But just not the most enjoyable game here. And I just don't see the Giants having a ton there. No Evan Ingram is going to continue to haunt them a little bit here. That's kind of the one safety valve that I think Daniel Jones has had here. Ingram should be better than what he's been in his young career, but still, Kyle Rudolph becomes your number 1 as a Vikings fan. I'm familiar with Kyle Rudolph, knowing he's not going to give you a whole heck of a lot other than maybe some red zone targets if they can get to the red zone. But it just is so diluted there. So you got Sterling Shepard, probably my favorite of the grouping, but he might go. I would expect him on Jock Market to be the highest or the most expensive of that grouping of Giants players. Darius Slayton, somebody who has some big game potential, has shown some promise here and there, but then it just gets, it falls off a cliff there for the rest of the Giants. It's not the best offense to be invested in. I think if I'm taking shots on Jock Market, and again, this is my take on it, I think it's going to some Saquon Barkley. I don't think he's going to have a very high valuation. And I know looking at some of his fair value stuff that we have available, he's going to be more expensive than what he should be. But at least I understand that he would have some red zone targets. I think from a PPR perspective, he's not going to get a ton of work here either. But just in terms of who could possibly score these touchdowns if the Giants get in the box, I got to feel like he would be the most likely candidate.
We have him at $7.22 as far as fair value on Jock Market, with a break even at 21.1 and a projected point total of 10.5. Mm-hmm. Now, he's at 9 as far as 8 guys are ranked ahead of him, including all 3 starting wide receivers. We know that this is a major weight on just how healthy or lack thereof Barkley is. So this is not anything more than circumstantial right here. You're really not going to get many opportunities for him being this down on the list, is my point, unless you're facing a guy who's not 100% in Barkley. Those numbers don't change your opinion at all, it sounds like. I mean,
what it is it's me just basically saying, all right, I don't know what these numbers are going to be till we have the pre-IPO phase. And I want to just at least be cognizant that if you had to pick one person to score a touchdown from the Giants tonight, who do you pick? Straight out.
Cadarius Tony.
Oh my God, I hate you. I mean, I love that answer because I didn't expect it and you're funny, but it would have to still be Saquon.
It's Barkley.
Yeah, it would have to be Saquon. Yeah. And for me, that's really where it comes down to is I don't see the Giants getting much scoring here. I think PPR scoring would incline me to go more towards Sterling Shepard here in this spot. And I don't think that's very shocking to anybody. Maybe Darius Slayton ends up being the next guy. I think we have them. You listed that off. They're both going higher value than Saquon. But in terms of upside, if I'm going to pick out who would be the guy who would finish first out of this grouping, it's hard for me to imagine that it wouldn't probably be Saquon. But investing in Daniel Jones alongside one of Shepard or alongside one of Slayton and having kind of the upside to have both of those shares kind of work out. Again, we don't have to just say only play one guy. You can get shares of different players here on Jock Market. And so I think kind of spreading out your exposure amongst those wide receivers, if you feel like the Giants do have a shot in this spot, is not the worst path to go.
No, not at all. And I think if not to harp on Tony or Cam Sims or anybody in those lines.
No offense to them, but lots of offense to them.
Yes, exactly. Like we'll draw that line, although your point about Adam Humphries is definitely well taken there. On the flip side, I don't think that, and we mentioned McLaurin from kind of the jump here as far as with Heineke and dealing with a defense and maybe an offensive script that's not asking him to throw the ball a ton, at least downfield. So looking at it ahead of time, knowing that the fair value we have for McLaurin, $14, just under 15 at 14.88 with that break even low at 5.1. And then of course he's going to be the highest projected guy out there. But from a realistic standpoint, it's easier to see of all of the impact players coming into it, for me at least, it's easier to see his role not mitigated, like completely evaporated, but reduced as a result of game plan. Like even if it's a tight game and the Giants are down by 10 and Barkley is healthy enough to play, they won't abandon him. They may even throw to him one or two times. But McLaurin can be taken out of a game in which Washington is still up by 7-10 points simply because of how quick and slow, or pardon me, quick and fast they want to get the ball out from Heineke's hands.
Yeah, it's going to be such a price. I mean, he's our highest fair value guy. So, I mean, we have him as the top projected player for Jock Market in this spot. So I think Terry McLaurin, just in a PPR format, definitely has some value. Only 4 targets, 4 receptions in that first game. What a brutal first 2 spots for the season for him here. Brandon Staley, he was the Rams defensive coordinator, completely changed them around in 2020. He's now the head coach of the Chargers and just neutralized Antonio Gibson, neutralized Terry McLaurin here in this spot. Helps to have Derwin James back for sure too. But that Chargers defense, brutal, going to be a brutal spot for a lot of teams this season. Same thing with on the other side of this one, the Giants. They don't play at a very fast pace. They're going to try to slow it down, and they've got overall they've got some amazing skill position players, specifically at the cornerback position. So James Bradbury being the number 1 matched up here. Terry McLaurin, I'm going to be very sensitive to that price that he has over on Jock Market. I think if he gets above that $15 mark, it's tough to see him paying off because you pretty much are asking him to finish first out of everybody in this game. And that becomes kind of questionable for me. But in any event that he's not the highest owned player here, or that he's not the most expensive player, I think you want to be invested in a PPR format. Logan Thomas, I really love as well. And we'll get to him here in a little bit. But Terry McLaurin, I think he should probably be the highest projected player in a PPR setting. And there's really no way around that.
All right. So as we've been telling you here with Jock Market, you can take full advantage of our promo code Awesemo. Hit us up, hit that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, all 3 channels, the Awesemo DFS, the Awesemo Odds, and the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. But use our promo code specifically here with Jock Market Awesemo, and we'll match your first deposit up to $50. And see a couple of new members here to Team Awesemo on the chat that you welcomed in as well.
Yeah, give them a hug. Welcome. We'll send you a welcome gift. The welcome gift is, we have so many promos running right now. So check out some of those that we have going. We got done with the Dak promo. That's on the other side. But there's another site that we have a promo going with that doesn't even make sense. But Jock Market here, giving you some free money too with promo code Awesemo. That's how you build and sustain a bankroll. There's no better thing that I can tell you right now than to use that promo code to get free money in your account right now. That is what we're going for, is helping everybody build money. And on Jock Market, again, we're going up against everybody else. It's peer-to-peer. We're trying to figure out where these shares are going to be. And we're going to give you the best information that we possibly can. But thanks for joining the team, and make sure you use that promo code when you sign up at Jock Market.
So there's an interesting development especially when you're applying Jock Market, that I want to get to as far as what happens once we get to kickoff and kind of in the game, and how to take advantage of that, specifically with where people are right now, the pre-IPO. But looking at our projections here and just kind of the fair value versus projected points, you mentioned Logan Thomas. I imagine that he's probably the most, even to the point of McLaurin, where McLaurin can get you more points, but still is reduced as far as his ceiling is capped. Thomas seems to be the most bulletproof, no matter what the game script would be, even if Gibson goes nuts on the ground, which is probably a good chance of happening. But Thomas stands a good chance from volume to just productivity of being heavily involved. So looking at the fair value, we have 10.25 for a break-even point of 11.5. And we have him as the 6th on Jock Market, highest projected guy. At just under 14 points. So those become a little more workable numbers, I think.
So yeah, this just comes down to what I saw in that Denver game and then going through some of the box scores as well. We don't want to overreact to everything that we saw in week 1, but one thing that does make a lot of sense to me is basically how the Giants handled, having a wide receiver 1 in Cortland Sutton on the one side. And it just opened up a lot of opportunity there for Noah Fant. In that first game of the season here. Noah Fant, 8 targets, 6 receptions, 62 yards. I think Logan Thomas could see some similar workload. Again, James Bradbury is just fantastic, and I will continue to say that here. I can't overemphasize how he is a difference maker. I mean, there's guys that just make sense that you have to know right off the bat. Lattimore, Hader, like these are the kind of guys that can make a difference from a cornerback position. And while we don't want to overvalue it by any means, it at least needs to be understood that you're not gearing Terry McLaurin to you're not going to want to throw the ball towards James Bradbury 14, 15 times with Taylor Heineke. That's just not in the range of outcomes, I think. What we are going to see, I think, is a lot of short outs. So Adam Humphries, Logan Thomas in PPR settings where they could get peppered with targets a couple yards out from the line of scrimmage. I really like the profile for Logan Thomas in this spot. I think he's going to be Taylor Heineke's best friend and the guy that is going to help him find success if they can through the air. I just think that $10.25 for a fair value, I can't imagine that he gets up that high. I think if I'm going to be investing in Heineke and him together in shares where I want them both to finish high, I'm more inclined to get to more Logan Thomas just because I can't imagine that price gets above that $10.25 spot. I won't know until the pregame IPO starts. And it's going to be really fun to watch as the game progresses because Logan Thomas could also be a guy goes out and catches 3 or 4 balls. And you could sell very, very high on Logan Thomas for a profit right out of the gate. And as the game goes on as well, you are so live with Logan Thomas in a red zone format that, he could be the guy who makes a difference later in the game. You are going to be live with those shares the entire game.
So that's kind of where I'm looking at now, Eric, is just taking advantage of guys that can still be consistent throughout the game and from both a buy and sell standpoint, which, as we know, once everything is locked in, kicked, this is far from it being over at Jock Market. This is where you can make a lot of movement / money as a result of it, taking advantage of getting ahead of the curve of any game script change. So looking at that, I mean, I don't imagine that Daniel Jones is going to be down 21-3 and then all of a sudden turning it on to light up for 350, 3 touchdowns, no picks, and leading his team back to victory. So if we're looking at guys who could benefit the most from either a slow start or cooling off from a fast start, I'd imagine that at the very least, we'd stay away from the quarterbacks, especially if it's a slow start.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even talk about Kenny Golladay yet either. I mean, Kenny Golladay in a come from behind situation or just flat out, I think he's our highest valued player at the wide receiver position. And, they get down 21-3, like you said, get in some kind of a spot like that. Golladay, Shepard, Slayton, all of those guys are going to be probably the best performers of the game outside of whoever gets in the box for the Washington team. PPR format, Daniel Jones having to come from behind. First of all, that's going to be enjoyable to watch. I wish we could play some defenses over on Jock Market. That would be a lot of fun today. I would be very invested in that. I will be around the industry today, but it's such a slugfest that I got to expect if they do get behind, that is the time you're going to want to just buy into those wide receivers right then and there. Like I might want to wait a little bit, specifically on guys like Slayton, Shepard, Golladay, just kind of waiting till the game does start. If you get in one of those spots where they're trailing by a few, that you should be invested right away because PPR, they're going to get peppered with targets all over the place. I think kind of buying into whoever is the cheapest out of all of them is probably the right way to go about it. I don't have a strong lean. They are so tightly projected for us. Darius Slayton's a little distant from Shepard and Golladay, but rightfully so. I just think that there's going to be a massive amount of turnovers and potential for some craziness to happen here. But yeah, I would want to be invested. If it's 21-3, get Gibson in the event that he didn't already score those touchdowns, and get the wide receivers on the other side for the Giants.
Yeah, before we hit Gibson in a sec, just about the wide receivers, the most difficult part about all of this isn't even that, for me at least, that you've got two guys that are basically tied at the hip, and then Slayton, who's kind of like tied at the ankle with one leg free, right? You've got a quarterback.
Spit out my coffee.
Sorry, man. Now, is that Italian? Is that like true Italian blend that you smuggled back from Italy, or is that just the regular stuff you normally get at home?
Yeah, I'm a bad kid. No, it's literally Starbucks K-Cup from my Keurig. You know, just solid black, nothing to it. Just straight up American.
You couldn't even smuggle like a couple of grains home, a K-Cup from them home?
I wouldn't appreciate it as much. Plus, it takes time. Like I don't have time like that. I gotta keep putting in the work.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough. But the problem that I have is that we just have to rely on this guy in Daniel Jones. And it is such a problem because he doesn't have this Andrew Luck in him where he could throw 2 or 3 picks and then be the reason why you win in the second half. He could fumble the football, throw a pick in the first half, and actually have a worse second half. But you're right. From a value standpoint in game, you'll probably see everybody deteriorate and drop. How does it play out with Gibson? I mean, that's an interesting element here because if Washington is up, let's say, heading into the half, and Gibson isn't the reason by any means, you may be able to find people giving up, not realizing that they'll most likely lean even heavier on him, even though he wasn't the reason in the first half and still probably got some touches.
That's the best part about playing on Jock Market is you get to use that kind of analysis and that logic of knowing sports to do things in the moment. It is on other DFS sites. I can't change my lineups midway through the game to be able to adjust to what I think is going to happen going forward. And on Jock Market, I am able to just cash out. I'm able to add things here or there to my portfolio based on the way that I see the game playing out going forward. The same thing. Like I wanted to flip this too, because you had said 21-3 with the Washington football team being up. If it's 21-3 with the Giants up, you should be just hammering JD McKissic. You should just be hammering some of these guys like Terry McLaurin or Adam Humphries as well. I mean, those are the things that allow for you to just find those, not diamonds in the rough, because I think most people who are going to be playing on Jock Market know most of these players. But JD McKissic, his role is going to be in a come from behind situation. It's not going to be going and leaning on JD McKissic in the running game after his one carry in week 1 that he saw. I'm just pretty certain that there are things within the game flow that you can take advantage of on Jock Market that you just can't do on other sites. And so for me, that's going to be where I invest in more JD McKissic in the moment in the event that they're down, or Adam Humphries or whomever else.
So let's assume that it's more of the opposite here. Are you selling anybody high? For example, Daniel Jones is up 21 to, I don't want to use 21-3 because the likelihood of that, and that's going to kill my under bet. I don't even want to put that out there. Right? But let's just say it's something more reasonable. Let's say it's a 13, let's say it's 17. All right. I'll give you an extra 4 points here. It's a 17-7 scenario. Daniel Jones has looked sharp. He's thrown 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. This is a pick, a fumble, a turnover waiting to happen in the second half. Are you taking advantage of that turn that, even if the Giants walk out and win the game, there's still a turnover inside Daniel Jones that's just dying to get out?
I hope it's just like a 1-score game, though, because I can't imagine that any coach on planet Earth is going to give Daniel Jones the green light to drop back if they're up 21-3 or something. This number that we're throwing out here for it.
Not 21-3.
Yeah.
How about 17-7?
Yeah. Okay. 17-7. Exactly. I'm excited about 17-7, 17-10, anything of that regard for sure. It won't turn into Saquon Barkley and God forbid, anybody else in that backfield. But I think that there's definitely going to be, if you get to that kind of a spot, you got to kind of start thinking Kyle Rudolph. You got to start thinking some of the shorter route guys, maybe even some Kenny Golladay, finding some ways to get to more of him as the the de facto number 1 wide receiver I would expect going forward for that team, things like that. But on the other side, for me, it becomes whichever team is trailing just invest in the guys who haven't performed yet, the guys who might have the lower ask price, getting to the JD McKissic, Adam Humphries, and of course, Terry McLaurin, who's the highest ranked player on Jock Market today. I'm excited for the in-game portion of this, especially in a low total game, and knowing that the volume is pretty concentrated for Washington, but there's still some sneaky spots, Logan Thomas, Adam Humphries, JD McKissic, that are going to be very game flow dependent. So I love the way that you're thinking about that. I think that is going to be how I attack Jock Market tonight for sure.
Anybody else from a long shot standpoint? And look, let's think of it this way. I hate to go back to 21-3, so forget that number specifically, but it may not be at the half. This may be a third quarter part of it where you could feel the game getting out of hand, where it's starting to get out of hand heading into the half, and you can just, that both of these teams are not great and definitely not as advertised. So from that standpoint, especially if the Giants are down, it's going to be very difficult against that pass rush with Washington to mount many comebacks or long drives. Point being is that once you get ahead of a blowout, you can start to look at guys that are much lower on that list and maybe find somebody who's going to get a lot more second half reps than they normally would in a much tighter game.
Yeah, and I hate to say it out loud because this just hurts to say, but Cadarius Tony would be the guy.
There you go.
If I had to throw one guy out there
earlier, he's going to score tonight.
No, he's not. Stop it.
Let me find Cadarius Tony's player prop on scoring a touchdown and smash it.
If it doesn't have plus 4,000 attached to it, I'm
anytime
staying clear.
Touchdown.
Steer clear of the atmosphere over Cadarius Tony. No, I would probably find a way. So you're getting 3-4 wide receivers on the field in a comeback scenario. So Cadarius Tony, at least he was on the field. He had 2 targets, 2 catches last time out. I don't expect him to be out there on any 3 wide receiver sets. It's pretty straightforward Shepard, Slayton, Golladay, but you get in these come from behind situations and everything kind of goes. So Cadarius Tony, he only saw 8% of the offensive snaps, but it was all in kind of come from behind garbage situation there. I think he would see the field at the end there too. Also just kind of that's the other nice part about Jock Market, watching the game and seeing if there's an injury that takes place, if there's something else that happens. As soon as something happens to one of those other wide receivers, invest in Cadarius Tony. Don't invest in the other 2 wide receivers that are already expensive. So that's just another part of what you could invest in and being sharp and being, quick on the draw with some of the stuff on Jock Market. Somebody goes down, out of those core 3. That's when you want to play Cadarius Tony, because I think he's pretty straightforward, the wide receiver 4, as much as somebody can be a quote unquote straightforward wide receiver 4.
What about if Washington, in fact, is down, which, again, is a very likely scenario on your way out? Can you apply that same strategy to Cam Sims, somebody like that?
I think it would be Dyami Brown for me, just because I think there is such big play potential where he could really move up a board quickly. I haven't seen much of him, only 1 target the first game out. I don't really know what to expect going forward, but the unknowns around him make it a pretty easy investment. Pretty easy to talk myself into investing into a dude that pretty much is going, what is his fair number attached to him? He's up to $5.57. I think that's pretty surprising to see. I think that's probably a good outlook for him for the entire game. I mean, he's a guy that I think is just straightforward, the wide receiver 2. He did have 4 targets. His 1 reception was for -2 yards. Wouldn't it suck if you had to retire out of the NFL or something happened and you had to tell your friends, how many receiving yards did you get in the NFL? And you had to say -2.
Yeah, that'd be tough. Is there a site that you could pay to scrub that from Pro Football Reference? So
yeah, I was going to say you would probably have to.
It's pretty difficult.
I would have more receiving yards in my career in the NFL than Dyami Brown if all things ended today. That's a good feeling. You and me crushing it.
Yeah, look, I'd still rather take the check and clear the money and have negative than not clear the money and not have any.
Yeah, that's very true. It's very true.
Speaking of money and free money, use our promo code Awesemo for a match up to $50 on your first deposit. Appreciate you, Eric. Thanks to Tyler. Thank to you out there as well. Just hit that thumbs up button and make sure you're subscribed to the Awesemo channel, the Awesemo odds channel, the Awesemo fantasy football channel. You are fully prepared here on Jock Market, and you can thank Eric Lindquist for that. I'm just here along for the ride. Have a great night and good luck.